Welcome to Workflow from Home. I'm Michael Cioni, and just like you, I've been working from home while creating this series. It's conceived to give video creators of all sizes and all industry disciplines the information and tools needed to stay productive while working from home. In this episode, we're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna get a behind-the-scenes look at how a large-scale finishing facility executed a temporary shift from high-capacity brick-and-mortar-based workflows to workflow from home setups and has still continued to deliver 4K HDR digital intermediates for many of the episodic series and features that you're watching while you're at home. Post House Light Iron invited us for an inside look at how their combination of local hardware and cloud-based solutions has not only kept up with client demand, but have uncovered new efficiencies that they expect will help all of post-production improve in future workflows.
My name's Ian Verdovec. I'm a colorist at a company called Light Iron.
I'm a senior DI colorist at Light Iron.
I'm Lance Hayes, and I'm the Director of Engineering at Light Iron.
My name is Nick Hassan. I'm a senior colorist at Light Iron.
In episode 9, we tackled some key concepts about synchronous review. When it comes to post-production houses like Light Iron, clients are typically expecting to collaborate in synchronous ways. So how does a company with a continental footprint, an on-site staff of editors and colorists and engineers who all work on expensive, specialized hardware, collaborate with clients from around the world who are no longer able to be on site with them? Well, first, we come back to a theme that we've discovered in previous episodes. That is, companies who have transitioned to remote work most successfully are the ones who have flexible and innovative workflows already in place. So let's start with structure. First of all, Light Iron has 3 main departments.
Your deliverables department in Light Iron, that is called the machine room. So they basically do all the final deliverables that get sent out to the studios. You have your editorial, which is the backbone of the facility. They are the ones that take the reels from the creative editors and then conform the high-res footage as proxies. And that is what creates the timelines, which then feeds into the colorists. And the colorists then are able to do their work.
Before COVID-19, we would operate by having filmmakers kind of physically show up at our locations. You'd have people traveling in from Vancouver, traveling in from Atlanta, traveling in from New York. We're structured around this collaborative workflow where I'm in constant communication with an editor and a producer, and there's shots being cut in and reconforms and, oh, this split screen isn't right, can you redo it? And there's just this constant evolution of how the film or the episode of television comes together. And it's that collaborative workflow that becomes the real challenge, where it's just like, oh yeah, I can get some footage in my house and color correct it and render out a quick time. That's not really a problem. What's a problem is, well, if I get new VFX shots every morning and I have my editor cutting it in and we're trying to review those VFX shots with clients and I'm also working with, it starts becoming very, very complicated.
Light Iron is faced with 2 immediate challenges. First, obviously, they need to be able to collaborate with clients who could no longer physically be in the room with a colorist. Now, we've covered that topic in episode 1 and episode 9. But there's another problem that post houses face that not every remotely working company does. See, post houses need to find a way for their own teams to be able to collaborate with each other in different roles, different disciplines, with multiple people accessing the same high quality assets all at the same time, each in their own remote locations, without delays that impact delivery schedules. So how did they do that?
The post-production workflow, we often communicate it as being kind of like a hub of a wheel and the different spokes sticking out. So the facility is at the center with all of this kind of infrastructure, and then you have the different things kind of sticking out from that hub. We needed to transition from wheel and spokes to more of like a spider web, where you still have the central point and you have the lines coming out, but then also the spokes themselves are interconnected and talking to each other directly.
Incredibly, the Light Iron engineering team had to figure out how to get everyone working remotely in basically one weekend.
It was a couple long nights. We had some Mac Pros delivered that were going to be used for another project, and we quickly converted those over to Resolve and Baselight. We just checked them out to the colorists, and they took home an X300 and their color correction systems and started working.
I literally showed up the day that the shutdown was announced. I was doing a session and I came out and they're like, okay, so you're taking a Baselight home today. I was like, oh, okay. So we packed up my car and I was just like, man, I hope I can put this back together.
the amount of hardware equipment that is implemented to kind of get these films done at high res, 8K, uncompressed with all the layers of color correction and denoise, you end up building quite a large server room that has power issues and cooling issues, and things are quite a challenge to just move into a person's home.
Light Iron has a very open lunch eating area, and there's a lot of benches. So we basically staged every single machine and had it running and built. And then we had the operators come sit at those desks, check them, verify that they were working properly, and they would have to set it up. And the reason why we did this is because we wanted to empower the artists the ability to hook up the gear that they're gonna be working at home in case they needed to troubleshoot something.
Post-production equipment is very fragile. It's very high performance, it's very expensive, and it's just built to sit in a room. It's not built to really travel. I just kind of like threw blankets on it, and I think I grabbed like a bunch of hoodies to just like kind of smash in between the spaces so things wouldn't clank as I drove very slowly across Los Angeles.
I really love this. Lance came up with the ingenious idea to have the colorists participate in the disassembly of the stations themselves, which meant that they were able to successfully reassemble them at their home, which partially made them become their own engineer, making them more self-sufficient in their own hardware troubleshooting.
So my home setup is in my guest room. That was the easiest place that I could put it where the kids could be kept separate. I had to put up a baby gate and keep them out of the room. Too much expensive equipment. I have a Mac Pro. The Bakelite version is a fairly new version that I think they were going to release at NAB, being able to work on a Mac at all. So I have that set up. I have a Max Digital RAID, a little over 100 terabytes of space. I have a Bakelite slate panel and an X300.
I ended up commandeering a spare bedroom in my house, putting into like kind of picnic tables and covering them with a sheet and putting all this expensive gear kind of just like on a picnic table in my spare bedroom. It works out pretty well. I've got a table in front of me with kind of my monitor and my control surface. And then of course I have an iPad kind of dedicated for that review platform that has Frame.io on it, Motion, Pix, all of the platforms that, whatever that production is requiring, I have access to.
So I set my room up in our spare bedroom pretty much the same way that I would have set it up in our suite at the facility. So I have an X300 in front of me with the DaVinci Resolve control panels, a GUI monitor to my right and my scopes to the left, and then a Mac Pro underneath the desk with a Thunderbolt 3 RAID under the desk as well.
So once every Light Iron colorist had their home systems up and running, what was their workflow like? How did it compare to the setups back at the Post House? And the bigger question, with several $1 million of gear spread across all these cities and working with their editors and data teams in a remote web, how did that impact productivity?
So a typical workflow for us is that the media will be at the facility. So the client will turn over their edit and we'll pull all the media from LTOs onto our SAN. From there, our editor in Santa Clarita will dial in and start editing. He'll get everything lined up, get all the opticals done and any effects and titles that need to be dropped in. From that point, it'll come to me in Burbank where I will color it, send the project back to our facility in Hollywood. And from there, they'll send a color file to look for people to look at that will go out all over the country. From there, we'll get notes. I'll address those notes. It'll go back to the facility. The facility will render all of our deliverables, and then those will go out to all the studios and broadcast channels.
I'm doing mostly 4K series. I have HDR and SDR deliverables. So that's one of the advantages of having the X300. I could do the HDR version and then switch it over to SDR and look at the Dolby Vision trims.
One of the films that I'm working on right now, I did my past kind of all unsupervised. I got notes over the asynchronous review service, and then we decided, okay, we're gonna do like a supervised stream. What I'm actually looking at and what I'm actually grading, I have local files, but I'm looking at them in 4K on the monitor in my house. But my system is kind of synced to another system at Light Iron that is streaming both back to me and over to the director. I have a iPad with Google Hangout, and then I have another iPad with the Streambox application, so I can see what he sees and the quality that he's seeing it on the same device that he's seeing it in real time with my conversation with him, and just have kind of a regular grading session.
One of our biggest challenges of moving home was that we had to complete the final 2 episodes of a primetime network television series. The timeline was pretty challenging. We would receive the material on a Monday, color Monday, Tuesday, and then we would often be QCing on Friday, and it would be on air the following week. We were able to deliver the last 2 episodes of this high-profile series from my spare bedroom, and everything went great.
One of the biggest strengths of Lightiron, why I love the company so much, is that we've always focused on innovation. And so this transition for us, while obviously unexpected, I felt like went quite smooth, and we were up and running almost straight away. I'm actually probably busier this month than I was in January.
Since coming home from the shutdown 7 weeks ago, I've been able to finish 2 feature films, as well as 10 episodes of a Fox series that will start airing in the fall. And we're gearing up on starting another 2 features next week. So we've been pretty much the same productivity at home that we have been at the studio.
What I find noteworthy about this story, which is evidenced throughout the entire expert testimonies that we've had in this series, is that flexibility lends itself to productivity. What's more, Lightiron discovered that the ability to remain as productive as possible while being remote wasn't as technologically steep as they anticipated. On the whole, the technical challenges associated with going remote ultimately turned out to be relatively insignificant. And it turns out Lightiron's biggest adjustment, at least initially, was in the way they communicated and interacted with their clients.
I mean, the biggest challenges, I think, is just really client involvement. There's nothing quite like sitting in a room with someone and having a collaboration and discussing color and being able to kind of read their body language and figure out what people like and what they don't like. You don't have quite that same level of communication.
It's not a technical challenge. We've kind of largely solved a lot of the technical challenge, but there is this creative challenge of knowing that you tried everything and knowing that does the person really understand what I'm saying and all these things without being there and having all those nonverbal communication things that us humans are kind of used to doing.
So one of the things that's been a challenge in remote is not having someone in the room with you and being able to read the nuances of their body posture, or maybe learning what too dark or too bright is to them. What I've been doing is with DPs that I don't work with, I will often send a wedge test to them. That allows us to just very easily with a still visually get onto the same language and understand what too bright, too dark, too saturated, not saturated enough means.
Obviously, not being able to receive those nonverbal cues was something the colors felt to be a disadvantage, but identifying problems like that tends to pave the way for new opportunities and innovations. What about the less obvious advantages? And what could that mean for the future of how this part of the industry ultimately operates?
There's really no going back to the post-production industry the way it was before COVID-19. I think it's more about defining the future and kind of writing the industry the way we want it to be kind of post-COVID-19.
I actually think sometimes it's better for clients to review things on their own as well. Just being able to review a file and take the time and go through and really look at it without any pressure of me sitting there waiting for notes, I think is kind of nice for clients sometimes.
These platforms like Frame.io, where a filmmaker can load up a QuickTime render, view on an iPad Pro or a really good display, and go through and make these notes, becomes an incredibly efficient use of time. And so through all of this, in a strange way, people might really realize like, oh, I don't need to necessarily go in to do color correction all the time. It's actually better for me in some cases to just get the first pass on my own, and then I can sit down and I can focus and I can just be alone in a room and go through and just bang out, 100 notes. And it's a very efficient kind of use of time.
I don't think we'll be seeing as many DPs, directors, and producers coming into our rooms. I think we'll be seeing a lot more remote reviews, but I think we'll still be at the facility working there to keep the media in one place. And with technologies like Frame.io, we're now very easily capable of doing reviews over the web and getting notes that make sense and we know exactly what they are, and integrating that into the resolve has made that process really, really smooth.
If you've been watching this series, you and I are kind of going on a little discovery journey together. See, we didn't have this whole plan mapped out when we started. We didn't know where this was going to go, and we relied on you to help influence the direction that we've ultimately traveled. At first, everything was admittedly pretty blurry, but together over time, we've started to see several patterns coming into focus. First, the people in the companies who sit at the forefront of innovation are able to pivot the most easily. And second, even companies who were previously rooted in brick and mortar, in-person, synchronous on-site behavior are gaining valuable insights from the work from home experience, and they kind of like it. There's increased efficiency. There's less time spent traveling or commuting. There's clearer, more intentional communication. There's even been a time reduction for creatives waiting on assignments or instructions or feedback. We're hearing this again and again from both the vendor side and the creative side. So I'll leave you with something to ask yourself. What parts of the job are you dead set on keeping the same? And which parts are you willing to change? Will there be a substantial and permanent shift in the balance between synchronous and asynchronous work models? Or will decades of old habits pull us back to the system we knew? Over time, something new is certainly going to emerge. And as we'll explore in upcoming episodes, best of all, you have a say in what that ultimately looks like.